breath before the plunge in this issue of Thor number 11. So our comic opens up with narration by Lady Freya, who is explaining to us that Thor spends a lot of time swimming through the sun. Well, he just sort of like takes his hammer and he goes out there and just sort of swims around looking for bits of Mjolnir that had been destroyed to hold up the Mangog. And it just sort of talks about how the fact he just spends all his time, so much time in there. Like he takes a new hammer and he has the hammer fly him through the sun, and he goes there until his eyes start to boil and everything else. Until ultimately his hammer gets destroyed. And ultimately Lady Freya's had enough of this. She's like, Thor, you gotta come out here. And Thor used the excuse that, with the war with Malekith the Accursed, we need all the weapons we can get. And he's also talking about how frustrated he is because there's not much they can do against Malekith until he begins to move. But with that in mind, a lot of people are getting hurt, a lot of people being slaughtered all across the realms. It's just chaos, and they can't do anything about it until Malekith leaves his realm to come to them. And Lady Freya is sort of like, okay, yeah, sure, okay, but that's sort of not the problem here. You're too focused about this hammer. And she's also pointing out that he's afraid. And so she says, "Come with me, Thor. We're gonna go have some mother-son bonding time here." So they get some hammers out and they sort of fly through space. And it's always weird when you think of the fact that they can't fly without hammers. It's just sort of weird. And she talks about the fact that when you were a little kid, you were sometimes afraid. Like he used to be afraid of thunder. That used to leave him shivering. And Thor was like, that doesn't really help. And he points out you didn't need a hammer to conquer your fears then. Instead, you conquered the thunder itself. No storm that ever raged has ever matched the will of Thor. And she talks about the fact that, you've lost your courage. You don't believe in yourself. And this has sort of been the problem with Thor ever since Nick Fury whispered in his ear in Original Sin that Gore was right. That in Thor's mind, no one is worthy of Mjolnir, especially gods. And so with that in mind, he doesn't see himself as worthy. And now he's afraid that without Mjolnir, that he can't do anything. He will not be able to save the realms. He won't be able to stop Malekith the Accursed. Despite all of which he's gone through, even in the story of Unworthy Thor, where he realized that he's still Thor without his hammer, now he's wondering as if, even if I am still Thor, is that enough? And she says, well, come with me. And she takes him to Midgard, Earth. And it turns out Thor's emotional state has led to some, weather problems. As Thor rages within himself, he is causing floods, earthquakes, and as Freya goes down and saves people, she points out that Thor's greatest strength has always been his heart. We see this as he's just wielding two hammers to split the waves, to split the water, to allow people to run across to safety. And that may be what will save the realms. That may be what stops Malekith is the heart of Thor, because there is no one in any of the realms that has a heart bigger than Thor. And then we get a flashback to many years ago when Thor had to bury his lover, Erica the Red, and this is sort of, I think, when Lady Freya realized exactly the kind of person Thor was, exactly how good a person he was, because he heeded her advice. Is like, forget hammers, find love. And he found love. He found love with a mortal woman, and it changed him. Then we cut to untold eons from now in the future with Allfather Thor, and it's apparently his last days. He's finally hit the ticker, but he's rambling. He's mumbling about, the war coming, the war of the realms, but there is no war currently. So he's remembering at least the events of War of the Realms, and then we cut to the Bronx, where a bunch of Asgardians are sort of recuperating, and we see Volstagg, who is still recovering from being, not just the War Thor, but fighting the Mangog. And he's talking about how, there's a war coming and it needs the War Thor. The War Thor has to be there, which I kept thinking was War Horse, and I kept thinking of Steven Spielberg at the same time. But they're able to subdue him, to, sedate him. And then Jane Foster, meanwhile, has gotten, the reveal that her cancer is in total remission, that, she does not have cancer anymore, per se. And I'm still thinking she still should have died. Either way, I think it would have been much better for her character, for her arc, if she had died, but no one wanted to kill off Jane Foster, except me. Then we see Sif and Valkyrie, they're sparring, they're getting ready for the war. And then we see Lady Freya and Thor's half-brother Baldur. At least I think that's Baldur. And, they're getting ready to meet up with Thor, see how he's doing. Thor said he'd stop by. And Lady Freya points out that he's not his father just yet. Odin is doing nothing but sitting there sulking. And I think what Lady Freya is trying to point out to us is that, Thor's at a crossroads where he can either rise to the occasion and be better than his father, or continue the sort of shambled ruin of a legacy that is Odin. And then we cut to Jotunheim, where we see Loki, who is still feeling pretty bad about himself. Because earlier in this whole story with Jane Foster Thor, he had stabbed Lady Freya in an attempt to hopefully bring the war to an end, to keep her from being killed by Malekith, and to eventually kill Malekith himself. But now none of that's happened. He's done all of that. He's lost his mother's trust for nothing, and he feels pretty bad about himself. And then we cut to Svartalfheim, where Malekith is finally getting ready. Like, okay, we're going, guys. We're ready? We're getting down there. We're going to wreck this place. We're going to run this town tonight. Thor, meanwhile, is in front of the sun, and he takes the little piece of Mjolnir that he found, and he leaves it in the sun and says, look, I got to go. Or more appropriately says, I can't spend all my time looking for Mjolnir. And he just lets it go, lets it fall to the sun, and says, even if it be the end of me, I will join you in the fire, Mjolnir. So the idea is that, he plans to die in the sun, be with his glorious hammer, but as of right now, he has to deal with Malekith. And as he leaves Mjolnir to fall into the sun, something starts crawling out as the comic ends. So, Thor issue 11. We're getting to War of the Realms. That's sort of what I'm more interested in. I'm glad the art changed. I did not like the art in earlier Thor books. It really just made me drop the book as a whole. I just didn't like it. And it will be nice to see what leads to Thor getting Mjolnir back, because as we see with All-Father Thor, he has Mjolnir. So what led to that, we don't quite know. Or exactly what will lead to him becoming the All-Father. Will it just be after War of the Realms, or will something happen to Odin that will lead him to taking up the mantle? We don't quite know yet. And with that in mind, let's bring this video to close here. If you're new to the Bucket Think Tank, feel free to like, comment, share, subscribe. If you've been reading Thor, what have your thoughts been on it? Did I get something wrong about the man? Was it the Mangog? I'm not entirely sure. And leave your thoughts down in hopes for War of the Realms, and I will catch you all later. This is the Bucket Think Tank signing off. Thanks for watching, and may your fandom serve you well.